3.5 years ago, I became a father. That feeling is so surreal. It's incredible. And I remember holding my son in my arm at the hospital. And I have this interesting habit of always asking myself, anytime I have a skill or knowledge or talent, what do I do with it and what best can I do with it? So that was the only thing that was running through my mind at that time. What do I do with this boy and how best can I help him? And the interesting thing is, I thought that, well, the Bible says, train up the child the way he should go, and when he grows, he will not depart from it. So, well, I should do that, right? But what is the way he should go? Is there a particular way of life or living? Is there a way we should live our life? And that is something that set me on an incredible journey of finding what was true about life and about living. Today, my hope is to be able to share with you the things that I discovered whilst I pursued this interesting path. Let me begin with you on my theory of truth. So for me to be able to help my son better, I thought that I need to find out what is true about life. Interestingly, for all the years that I have lived, I have never taken the pause to ask myself, what is this life really about? What is true about this life and how should we live it? But now I am at this point where I need to find those answers in order to be the kind of father that I have to be to my son. So I began by trying to learn from the people that I thought had wisdom, who had lived this life, started asking all the relevant questions that I could ask, reading the books that I could read, trying to find knowledge from the people that I thought had good believability. And I came to this conclusion that the veracity of a statement or a message or a belief depends on the coherence or the correspondence between that message and its objective evidence. So what I mean is that for us to know if something is true, we have to test the objective evidence that supports that particular claim. So for me to know what was true about life, it was very simple. Look at what is objectively true about life. And for me to know what was objectively true, I needed to look at the objective evidence. And for me to have an objective evidence, I needed to have empirical evidence and testimonial evidence. Empirical evidence are the data that you can gather and test, sometimes at the lab, or you can, for instance, if somebody said they had a miracle, could we verify this medically? Right, that is trying to gather the empirical evidence that supports that claim. So I started trying to look at all that, and the testimonial evidence as what people generally say through their experiences. And if you have more people saying they experienced something, that could mean that that thing is true. At least that could offer you some objective evidence. But here's the funny part of it. Whilst I try to look at these two, I think that I needed to also look at the practicality of it, especially in the day-to-day life. So who knows what is true about life? Who knows what is true about how we should live our life? It was difficult for me to determine initially. So that extended even my theory a little bit to include three things: believability, reliability, and replicability. Believability simply means that whatever claim that is being made, I'm trying to test the primary source of that information or that belief to determine whether it is credible, to determine whether it is trustworthy. So if I have to know about life, for me it was, well, who in this life has enough credibility and is trustworthy for me to listen to? Who has enough believability to have a say about life to which I can say it could be true? I think, well, Jesus Christ as a person is one that looking at all the things that people had written about him, the things that people had said about him, what he had done. He walked on water, he turned water into wine, he raised the dead, he healed the sick. The teachings of Jesus Christ by itself, and he himself dying and resurrecting, and people writing about it, different people giving different accounts about it. That was something that I thought, I had to look at carefully. That if I really needed to listen or understand life, this is someone I can't listen to because of the amount of believability that he has. Through his works. When John the Baptist was arrested, he asked his disciples to go and ask Jesus if he is the Messiah. And Jesus says, well, go tell John about the works, that the blind is seeing, the lame is walking. Jesus pointed John right to the works. That was something that to me was very fascinating. I thought that I put Jesus at the top when it comes to life and who I could listen to. So I will come to that. The second thing that I had to test was whether or not the claims of the person had enough reliability. If I look at the evidence that I provided, or the data, or the information, or the accounts of people, how is it reliable? Really, how is it reliable? How are these things verifiable? Is there a way we could verify the claims of these people? Is there a way we could test whether or not they are reliable? Are there people that practiced it and got results? All those things are key to whether or not something was reliable to me. So the teachings of Jesus about life, the words of Solomon, for instance, about life, are there things that are reliable? Are there things that you could say that if you look at what these people did, if you looked at, you listen to the words, the teachings, you could say these are claims that are verifiable. These are things that when we put into the context of society today, we will get result. That was key to me. And the third thing that was very important to me when it comes to my theory of truth was the replicability of that claim. If someone says something and the person gives particular guidelines to follow and I follow it, will I get that result? So if somebody says that this is how you actually have peace, and if I followed that, will I really get peace? If another person followed it, will they get peace? So that was also key to me. Have people practiced Jesus' teaching to which they have gotten the result that he promised? Or have people practiced some of the things from other people to which they got the result that they had promised? Those were key to helping me determine what was truth. So basically, the theory of truth, which I think that every person should really care about and be concerned about, is that don't just believe in something. Don't just accept something to be true. You need to be able to find out what are the testimonial evidence that supports these things, what are the empirical evidence that supports these things. And for you to be able to determine these things, you could simply test the believability, the reliability, and the replicability of it. And that's exactly what I did. So what I'm going to share with you is something that have been carefully tested on this scale. I have tried as much as possible to make sure that those with much believability, their thought and opinion holds much to me than anyone. So Jesus Christ is number one when it comes to some of the things that I'm going to share with you. And not even just because I am a Christian, but because I do not think anybody in this life has much believability than him. You can talk about the schools that people went to. You can talk about people's believability based on their credentials or their innovation. But none of them was able to walk on water. At least people said it. So Jesus is that person that I think that there is none in this world who has great believability than him. Nobody died and resurrected. Nobody raised the dead. And if you think these accounts are not true, that is a completely different conversation to have, because then it is a conversation on whether or not history can be trusted, whether or not the account of the old can be trusted. So if you told me that Einstein lived, then I get to choose whether or not I should trust whether he really lived because I didn't meet him. So it's not about whether or not we have met Jesus or whether or not we have experienced it. It is about whether or not these claims about him were truly written by people who lived with Jesus, whether or not Jesus lived, whether or not these claims or these accounts, right, by people could be tested. So testing what is true is fundamentally important. I think anything that is not built on truth eventually will crumble. If you build society not on truth, society will crumble. If you build love not on truth, it will fall, it will fail. Anything that is not built on truth will fail. And I thought that as a father, one of the things that were particularly important for me was to know what was true, what was objectively true. In fact, Jesus' account, he says that he came to bear witness of the truth when he stood before Pontius Pilate. And I found that to be very interesting. And moving from the theory of truth, I needed to now really look at my worldview and make sure that whatever I was saying about life and saying about the world was true. I think sometimes a mistake we make is to think that the way we perceive things is reality, but reality is reality. Reality is not our perception, and our perception is not reality. Our perception could be very distorted, and it could be wrong by our biases and by, some cognitive distortions and some things, some desires and interests. Whatever it is, our perception is not reality. And for me to be able to understand life from the perspective of truth, I needed to see the world for what it was. So now let me put away all that could be. And let me just look at the world starting from the point to which my baby is born. This guy knows nothing. He has no understanding of what I was saying to him. I'm saying, I'm your father. He's just looking at me. He has no understanding. So he came here blank, and whatever thing he was going to learn, whatever thing he was going to do were things that he will eventually learn and practice. So for me, that was important about life. For me to understand life, it means that I needed to understand time. And time is, I think, something that many people don't really pay attention to. It's a phenomenon that people don't try to understand. But basically, time is we just trying to count the clock as this earth that we live in revolves and rotates, as it revolves and as it rotates on its axis. So at this particular moment, it's ticking. So for my son, now he's almost 4 years, but at the time I was holding him in my arm, the clock was ticking. Now, 365 days, we're going to say that he's 1 year. He turns 60. It's just the clock ticking because the earth is moving. It's constantly moving. It is rotating and it is revolving around the sun. So for me, that was crucial. As the earth rotates, what happens? As the earth moves, what happens? As the clock ticks, what happens? For me to understand life, it was just about understanding this. And that was the only way I could help my son to live a better life. So 3 things, as I observe, as the earth rotates and revolves around the sun, people, energy, and material resources move with it. There's a constant exchange between these 3. And I knew right in that moment that for us to live effectively, we have to be effective as people. We have to be effective with our use of energy and effective with our use of material resources. Because here's the thing. These things are not infinite. They are limited. So people don't live forever. Material resources are not there forever, and so is energy. At some point, I'm going to be tired and I'm going to sleep. At some time, I will not have energy. So for us to really make a change and live life effectively, we needed to understand the dynamics of these things. Let me begin with people. How do I get effective as a person? And how do I get effective with people? That was particularly key for me. How do I get effective as a person, and how do I get effective with people? I noticed three things with every individual. Number one is their heart set, basically what they value most, how their heart has been predisposed when it comes to the things they value. So if someone values, say, money more than human life, those people have a propensity to kill and to do all kinds of evil because they value money, or they love money more than they value the human life. So someone could attack you on the street just to take your watch or your phone because they value that more than your life. So basically, it was just about what people value most, their heart set. The second thing was about their mindset. Well, how do we perceive things? What was the predisposition of their mind in a way that determines the way they perceive things? So we all could be looking at the same thing, but we all may not perceive it in the same way. So people's mindset was also very key. And the third thing was our skill set. What can we do, or what do we do, and how best do we do it? So skills is just, well, what we do and how best we do it. Communication skill is, well, how we communicate and how best we communicate. Football skills, how we play football and how best we do it. So these were key about every human being as I observed. Their heart set, their mindset, and their skill set. What they value most, how they perceive things, and what they do and how best they do it. I thought that for us to live effectively, we needed to pay attention to it. And we needed to also understand this about people in order to relate to them better. The second thing for me was our use of energy. How then do we use our energy? Because we don't have it in abundance. They are limited. So being able to get effective with our use of energy was also very important. And I thought that this was key to the things that people like Paul taught about redeeming their time. Paul talked about how we should understand time and how God should help us to redeem time so that we can apply our heart to wisdom. So wisdom was being able to understand time by realizing how limited energy and material resources and how limited we are, even as people, when it comes to time. All these things are in the constraint of time. So how then do we get effective with our material resources? Basically, the resources that come to us and the resources that get out of us. Now, this is where money as a legal tender became relevant and useful. Because in exchange of material resources, we realized that we had particular problems like double coincidence of want, which was because of the barter system. So if I had yam and I have to exchange yam with you for meat, I needed to be sure that, well, I need your meat first. And I have to be sure that you also need my yam. That problem with double coincidence of want is something that would have been a challenge, especially as humanity increased in number. So we evolved. We introduced something that now you don't need to look for me. All you need to do is sell it to someone who has money and then come to me with the money and buy from me. So money as a legal tender solved all these problems. It helped us to defer payment. It became a measure of value. So that's the thing about money. So for me, it was not about teaching my son just about money. It was teaching my son the dynamics when it comes to people, energy, and resources. This is why people employ and pay you. Because what you're doing is this, they're taking from you three key things: your heart set, your mindset, and your skill set. And even as a husband, this is something that I also teach in my home. And this is something that I talk to people who are close to me about. By understanding what they value most, I understand the kind of decision they are likely to make. By understanding the way they perceive the world, I understand the way they will feel about things. Because the way you perceive things will impact the way you feel about those things. And by understanding how they do things and how best they do it, I know how I can help them develop those skills. So now let me talk to you about the effective living model. Today I'm happy to even announce that we have built a system that in the coming months we are going to make available to all of you. The system will help you to put all these things into practice. I hope that I can move you from just words into actions. I realized that that was my problem. I knew so much and I had not done so much. Knowing something is completely different from doing them. So the effective living model was just picking all these theories and now building something that will best communicate what I had found out about life. Remember that I began with the theory of truth. I talked about the veracity of a claim or a statement, being determined by the coherence or the correspondence between that information, okay, and its objective evidence. So by testing that, I had to look at what was the objective truth. And I had to then look at what was the objective evidence. And by looking at that, I had to look at what was the empirical evidence and look at what was the testimonial evidence. And to be able to arrive at these evidence, I had to look at, well, of course, who has much believability? Who has reliability? Or what they are saying, does it have reliability? And whether what they are saying and the promises of their claims have enough replicability. And by testing these things, I realized some of the teachings that I was so blown out and that really deepened my faith in God. It begins with the concept of love. I listened to the teachings of Jesus. And I wanted to understand what all that it was about Jesus' life. What he did, what he taught. First, the story begins with God loving the world. This world, no matter how bad you think it is, God loving it and coming down, as Christ to save it. Now, that was very interesting for me. So God gave his only begotten son to this sinful world so that he would save it. That really changed the way I saw the world. It changed my worldview completely. That God cared about every individual in the world to the extent that he would give his only begotten son for it. So Jesus came also teaching about love. They asked him, what are the greatest commandments? And he says, you will love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your soul. And you will love your neighbor as yourself. They asked him, who is my neighbor? He shared the story of the Good Samaritan, a man who was attacked by robbers, and there was a Levite who passed who did not mind him. There was a priest who passed who did not mind him. And there was the Samaritan who was passing who stopped to take care of him. I am assuming that Jesus was saying that your neighbor is the one who needs your help, of which you can provide. So you pay attention to it. Now, that changed the way I saw the world. It completely changed my worldview. Now, I've been studying the Bible, and it was not something that I thought was so important to pay attention to. So, effective living begins with having love in your heart. At least that's what I found. That we can only live better and live effectively when our heart is filled with love. When we can love our neighbor, when we can care about someone, when we can be there for someone, when we can value people beyond ourselves. That's where the heart set comes in. Can we put each other beyond anything else, just like God did, by putting humanity beyond even his only begotten son, giving his son for humanity? Can we value each other beyond anything, beyond the titles, beyond the name, beyond the fame? Can we value each other to the extent that now we want to attend to their needs? And I thought that if all of us could come to this place, I can only imagine the services, the quality of services that we will provide to others. I can only imagine the kind of things that we will do for others. I can only imagine the businesses that we will create, the solutions that we come up with, because all that we now begin to think about is how do I solve the problem of my brother? So the brother that is being attacked, right? Or the brother that is in need, the brother that is suffering, the brother that is having this issue, how do I help solve it? This is as simple as love. And I felt like if our hearts could have love, we will completely change the way we live our life. Now, I also began to look at the other areas that are relevant to life. And there are 4 areas that I realized, at least from the teachings of Jesus and the Bible, and from other books like Ray Dalio and other people that I read from. I think that when I look at life, and when I look at people, and when I really pay attention to the things that are relevant, 4 key things become essential to it. Our well-being, our physical well-being, our mental health well-being, our relationships, the relationship that we have with each other, our families, our, all that. And then the work that we do, or what I may call impact, and the wealth, the resources that we have. I realized that there was a relationship between them and how they affect the way we live our life. Our well-being, our relationship, our work, and our wealth. And when I looked at the teachings of Solomon and I looked at the teachings of Christ, these things became very important. John talked about how he wished that we will prosper even as our soul prospers. So there are areas of our life that could be particularly important to us. There are areas of our life that we can literally pay attention to when it comes to life. And there are research that actually support how effective relationships or good relationship contribute to the way we live our life. Research that supports how taking care of your well-being contribute greatly to how we live our life. Research that shows how people that find satisfaction in work and impact greatly improve their way of living. And even research that finds how wealth, I'm not just talking about money, but I'm talking about people having enough resources to meet the needs, their needs and the needs of other people, how those things greatly improve the life of humanity. And these are things that I think that the Christian should pay attention to. Not just the Christian, everybody that is listening to me. You can literally just look at them and pay attention to them. And really looking at all these 4 areas, I realized something that will incredibly even change our lives. And that brought me to even a higher level, which was wisdom. The key to holding all these things. I spent all the time reading the writings of Solomon, and my conclusion was Solomon was saying that in order for us to find the balance that is needed for effective living, what we need is wisdom. By wisdom, a house is built. By understanding, it is established. So Solomon was offering to us, something that will help us to find the right balance to live in. What is wisdom? Wisdom is knowledge, understanding, and application. In my view, for you to live wise, you need to know what to do with knowledge. You have to know what to do with knowledge. So it's not just about acquiring knowledge, but it's about knowing what to do with knowledge and applying it. So Solomon bridges the gap, and the Bible offers incredible wisdom to how we can actually manage these areas of our life. And I found it that the Bible had, something to say about all these things, how we should work, how we should live our life, the things we should do, had something to say about our wealth, how we should manage our wealth, the seasons and all those kind of things, something to say about our relationship, how we should relate with our spouse, our children, and our family. I found out that the Bible even had something to say even about our well-being. So that moved me even to a higher level of understanding how we can really live effectively. And that brought me to this principles and priorities. I realized that essentially what the Bible was helping us to understand, what Jesus was helping us to understand, and what many people are trying to help us understand, which is the wisdom of life, is to have principles and priorities. Is to be able to prioritize the things that really matter in life, and to have principles that govern them. So principles that will govern the way our relationships are, that will govern our work, that will govern our wealth, and that will govern our well-being. Principles that help us. I mean, when you read these things, they may sound like laws. Like, why should we not eat this? And why should we do this? And why should we do that? And why should we? But these are principles, and the believer must see them as such. We will live better when we look at the principles that are relevant to life. And that is something that I think that the Christian should pay attention to. Look at the principles to life, and that is what is being offered to us. Principles that should govern. The Bible tells us that we cannot be friends with everyone. Those are principles. Principles set the boundaries to which we do things. We cannot do this. We cannot go there. You may just think about them as laws, but those are principles. And people who live by principles live better lives. And people that live by priorities live better lives. Many times when people don't prioritize right, they end up being less fulfilled. Sometimes they even think that they've wasted all their years because they didn't live by priorities. Being able to prioritize the things that really matter to you in your life is essential to living right. And those two eventually determine your values. So when you see a person that is living a life of values, it's because those people have understood the principles of life. Well, wherever they get their principles from will be their choice. But if you're a Christian, for instance, and your principles are coming from the Bible, those determine your value. And that's why I find it difficult to accept that a Christian can live just anyhow. And a Christian can live a life of lawlessness. Because eventually those principles and priorities will feed into your values. You will not just wake up and be a good mother and a good father if you don't have these things. If there are no principles and no values, you will not be. You cannot just wake up and be a team player without principles and priorities. Those are the things that feed into our value. And the last thing that I found out was I put together this model was purpose, which is the apex of it. At the end of the day, and there are a lot of research that I found that support this, people that live a life of purpose are people that truly live. And you don't really need to worry about what my purpose is. This is how we get to a life of purpose. When we begin with love in our heart, when we begin to prioritize the things that are important to our lives, when we begin to pay attention to our well-being, our relationship, our work, and our impact, and pay attention to our wealth, they begin to lead us into even a much more fulfilling life by our principles and priorities feeding into those values and descending into the wisdom. And that means that eventually we live a life of wisdom, but we live a life by love. And that gives us even a greater sense of purpose. Now, these are just the theories that I came up with when I made that decision to be a different father and to help my son. I'm sharing these things with you because I think that Christians need to live a better life. And we can live a better life when we understand what is really being said in the Bible. And today I want to challenge you that when you study your Bible, turn those into principles and rearrange your priorities. Let them fit into your values. And think about what to do with knowledge. That will determine how wise you become. And do that. And have love in your heart. Eventually, that will bring you to a greater life of purpose as you focus on the 4 key things that I talked about. And one thing I want you to also understand is to build your life on truth. If you don't build your life on truth, everything is just going to fall apart. Today, I'm even more excited to announce to you that coming in November, all these things that I shared with you, God put on our heart to build a system that would allow people to live it better. I mean, we don't just want you to just know things. We want you to do them. And because of that, we are introducing today what we call the Effective Living OS. It's a system that we have built in Notion. And the system will help you. If you're a family, it will help you to plan, to pay attention to what you do with time. with your energy and with your resources. To pay attention to your own life and how to greatly change it. In that system, we have built tools that will help you manage these 4 areas we talked about: your finances, your relationship, your work and impact, and your well-being. We built even more tools that will help you to live effectively. We have built a spiritual system that will help you to take your spiritual growth to the next level. In this system, you can have the things to learn every day. You can look at the topics to learn. Whatever it is, you can find it there. And you can write the notes. And whilst you study, in the note, you can literally determine what you're going to do with the knowledge and just do it. I'm really excited about it, and I cannot wait to share more details with you in the coming days. And I believe that this will help you live your life. Begin from a place of truth. Have on your eyes a lens of truth. Ask yourself, how is this true? What I have believed about life, how is it true? And move from the place of truth to a whole place of understanding life for what it is. Look at the world for what it is and deal with it. Your ability to see life for what it is will greatly change your life. Now, when you have done that, look again at this model that we have shown you. If there are things you can change, change them. If there's something you wouldn't want to change, keep it and use it. And hopefully, this helps us to live a better and effective life. God bless you.